Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and good afternoon to all of you, our respected viewers of the Voice of the Gates YouTube page, as well as the Voice of the Gates Facebook page. It is a great honor and a privilege once again to be welcoming all of you, our respected viewers, to the Voice of the Gates annual Matric Revision program, and this, of course, in collaboration with Futures Academy, SA's online high school. Today, inshallah, we will be continuing our Matric Revision dedicated to all of the matriculant students out there as they prepare for the trial examinations, or rather now ending the trial examination period and heading on into the NSC examination period, the main exams that they will have to write for their entire lives, basically, as a matriculant student. So without further ado, to prepare for that, and in particular to prepare for the geography students, we will call upon none other than Sister Aalia Kara to conduct today's session with regards to geography revision for the upcoming NSC examinations for geography, inshallah ta'ala. Sister Alia, all yours, inshallah. Bismillah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, and I hope you are all well. So, very frequently we have major issues where it comes to answering the map work section of our paper. Just marking some of the trial papers, we have discovered that GIS seems to be a very, very big problem with regards to our paper 1 as well as paper 2. So today I'm just going to take you through GIS and explain to you how exactly is GIS tested in our paper. So first of all, what is GIS? Please remember that it is a computer system that not only creates, manages, stores, but it also analyzes spatial data and all associated features. So what we actually use GIS for is to manipulate data to suit a user's needs. Some of the components of an equation can ask you this: what is the components of a GIS? And you will mention a computer, a scanner, a satellite, maps, map projections, data, photographs, and many more. So what exactly do we use GIS for? Scientific investigations, number 1. Resource management. So for example, if we want to know how much of minerals are found within a square meterage area, how many crops can be found on 1 hectare piece of land? Asset management in terms of how many buildings does a farmer have, for example, or how many cars, tractors, etc. does he have? Environmental impact assessment. So, for example, the flooding that is taking place in Cape Town at the moment, or around Cape Town, how bad was it actually in terms of scale? How big, how small? Was it on a grand scale? Was it in a small sector, etc., etc.? Cartography, that is map drawing. Disaster management and relief. So again, we find the area that is most disaster stricken and we can send relief to that area. And the last one, disaster risk management. Now, we get something called an overlay analysis. And all this means is we take a full piece of a map and we divide it up into different sections. So we would have an area of that map, and from that area of that map, we can build levels. So it's like almost like playing a game where we build on. We first start off with the ground, then we add in the grass, then we add in the river systems, then the building systems, wells, etc., etc. Exactly like that. It's building a game. How is it exactly done? We use information that is gathered from a variety of sources. And this information is called a variable piece of information. And this information can be taken from our latitudes, longitudes, provincial areas, elevation in terms of heights, benchmarks, again in terms of height, satellites, tabular data, so data that is found perhaps in cells, raw data, existing data that we find on the internet, census data, where we collect census of the country, we use that particular type of data, and last but not least, photographic data. So all these type of data are used, and we use this to now create our layers. Remember, this information is variable. Now, we get two different types of data. One is called a spatial data, and one is called an attribute data. Spatial data refers to just about anything that we find, whether it's man-made or natural, on a map. So we call that map data. I will say that again. So it's all features, objects, not only from natural but man-made, and we refer to that as map data. Then we get something called attribute data. Attribute data is either a characteristic or it is a specific piece of information about that geographic object or that map data. So, the two different types of data that we get, as we say, we get something called vector data and we get something called raster data. If you have a look at the little diagram on the top, you will see that it is a piece of a map showing a river system as well as a row of trees. If we have to show this as vector data, we will see it, how we find it underneath the vectorial data. If we have to show it as raster data, they will be formed in cells. The cells will be allocated a number, and the number will then be verifying a particular color of the actual data itself. Now, you would know vector data and raster data as your topographical map and your orthophoto map. Vector data will be your topographical, that means your color map, and raster data will belong to your orthophoto map. So, essentially, we can use both of them together and we can combine it into a particular GIS system, which will then give us what exactly we require. Now, when we look at different spatial data structures, in terms of raster data, as I said, they belong to what we call pixels. So the more pixels that we have underneath raster data, the clearer the image. Vector data is then taken from our raster data and we draw it out. And this often is reflected in three different terms: points, lines, polygons, or areas. So I will say that again: points, lines, or polygons or areas. So a point on a map will be anything that represents a single dot. So the S on a map, which represents a school, is called a point. The R, which could be a reservoir of that particular area, a spot height, a trig beacon, those all belong to points. Lines on a map would be a road, a railway line, a runway, a fence, a power line, anything that is a line. Even a river will be a line. An area, any shape on a map will be regarded as an area or polygon. So that could be a dam, that could be a lake, that could be a recreation center, the area itself could be a cultivated piece of land. It could be a building. Any area on a map will be regarded as your polygon. So what exactly is your spatial data? So I'm going back again to the beginning. Remember, I said it is any geographic data that is found on a map. So whether it's a house, whether it's a reservoir, whether it's a waterfall or a row of trees, they are all regarded as spatial data. And spatial data, again, I'm saying to you, we call that points, lines, and polygons. Points, a node, a line would be an arc, and an area would be a polygon. So let's look at an actual map and see exactly where our points, lines, and polygons are. If you have a look on your screen, you will see a point is pointing to a diagram of a monument. A monument is regarded as a point. It also is pointing to a single dwelling in this particular farmstead. So both of that would be regarded as points. Your lines on this particular map is your Aalia Kara, which is your river system, and your secondary road, which is the white and outlined in black. Your areas on this particular map would be your dam, which is your semicircle area, and your piece of cultivated land, which is the one that is symbolized by dots, and the background is almost green in color. Now, what exactly is resolution? Now, remember I said to you, vector data and raster data. Raster data belongs to pixels. Pixels belong to the word resolution. So, the ability of a remote sensing sensor to either create a sharp and clear image will be resolution. So, the more pixels we get, the clearer the image. The less pixels we get, the less clearer the image. So when we talk about this, let's take, for example, if you take in a selfie of yourself and you place your camera of your phone maybe 2 centimeters from your face, would you be able to take a clear image? No. Hence, your pixels are not clear enough. So the resolution of your photograph will be completely unclear. But if you have to take your picture at an arm's length, your resolution will be extremely sharp and extremely clear. Hence, it would have many pixels within it. So, exactly as you see, the higher resolution, many pixels, smaller pixels, and objects become easily recognizable. But if it has low pixels, it has less pixels, it has much larger blocks, and the objects are not easily recognized. Then another word in GIS is called scanning and digitizing. So what exactly belongs to this particular section of our GIS? Now, in order for us to gather data, we require a certain amount of survey methods. We can get this, for example, from our GPS systems, which can then be entered directly into a GIS system. Or we get something called remote sensing. Obviously, we know that this particular remote sensing, let's break down the word. Remote means far or isolated. And sensing means it is taking complete pictures of that particular area. So in this particular case, remote sensing refers to something that is far off. So most often a camera, a satellite, a camera probably fixed at the belly of a aeroplane or that is fixed on a hot air balloon. Satellites use different sensor packagings to passively measure the reflectance of part of the electrospectrum that we get. So what we're saying is that these remote sensors measure parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Through there, that's where they get the wavelength. And that wavelength has different categories or even colors. So, for example, the infrared spectrum is used to measure vegetation. So, that's how we use the remote sensing part. Now, let's break it all back down. It looks a bit scary when it looks like this, but it's quite easy. You have what we call a image processing area. So say, for example, now you have this particular beautiful image. Now, what exactly can we do with this image? That image can go into a lot of categories. The first thing that we can use an image for is, for example, an average estimation of the total population of that area, or health monitoring for that particular reason. Or we could use it in terms of yield, meaning, say, for example, I farmed for the whole summer season. And at the end of the summer season, now that I am harvesting my crop, how much of that crop do I actually have? And I can't really sit and count every piece of hay. So what I would do is I would use an image processor or a image that I get from a satellite to create a GIS layers, which I showed you right in the beginning. I broke down all those layers. I would then take the information that I need and I will then place it into a GIS system. And that GIS system can do a whole lot of things for me. It can give me graphs, it can give me data, it can give me images. Whatever I ask it to do, that's what it's going to create for me. All right, so image processing starts with a picture. We can either use not only a picture, but we can also use maybe studies, other different types of elements. We can include all of this. And eventually the output of what we get is what we are looking for. Spatial analysis. In terms of spatial analysis, a GIS system can perform two things. In terms of vector data, so when we're talking about vector data, we're talking about the topographical map. We can overlay. Remember those layers? Topographical map can do that very clearly for us. Or we can buffer. A buffer means we take our topographical map and we map out a certain area that we want to protect. Maybe because it is very near an area that perhaps is near an airport, and we want to protect that area so that if we want to grow the airport, we can expand the airport underneath a buffering sector. Or there is an area that needs to be conserved, so we use that to conserve that area. Or for instance, it's an urban area and we don't want people to build on that particular piece of land. We buffer it. In terms of raster data, remember, is your orthophoto map. We get things like map algebra, terrain analysis. So when we look at terrain analysis, we're looking at the different colors that we see on that particular, or shades of darkness on that orthophoto map. Spatial interpolation, again, it is looking at the different shades. Path analysis and georeferencing, we don't actually use this in matric level, so we don't have to actually concentrate on that particular aspects. Then, when we talk about, let's break it down, vector data, overlaying. Remember I said different layers. Buffering, I explained that to you. We protect that particular region. Right? So, and a typical example of this would be, we can plot a buffer zone of about 200 meters around a river. to ensure that no industries actually build there. Why? To protect the river from being polluted. Data manipulation. Now, often the question asks you about data manipulation, and we don't really know how to answer this particular question. So, any type of data can be manipulated, processed, and analyzed. How? We can take one map and we can create another one. Or we can take raster data and we can create vector data. Or vector data to raster data. Or we can interpolate between different spot heights. It means that we can figure out what's going on between one area to another and create those spot heights by giving it a number. Data integration, this is where we take different layers and we put them together in order to create a new one. So manipulation is changing, and integration means pushing it together or combining it. Buffering again, remember, we have to identify them. And the most easiest way to identify them is you find that there is, in my case here, I've placed it in yellow, but it is a thick green line that is surrounding an area. Now, let's go GIS in. Using both vector as well as raster data, we can show roads, schools, cultivated pieces of land, and we can create an attribute table for certain areas. Sorry about that. And we can create attribute data. What did I say attribute data is? We associate a characteristic to a particular piece of data. Right? So don't forget that. So here we go. This is vector data, where we took out the row of trees, which is here. On your map on the left-hand side, we find the row of trees. When we transfer it over, the first top arrow would show us how our rows of trees would look. Then our cultivated piece of land, which is on the first map on the right-hand side, we can then manipulate it in order to show that particular cultivated piece of land. Then we get the school, for example. So it's just underneath the word Stanford, and we get the S. We have placed a dot to tell us where exactly is the school. So what did we do? We used the line, which was the row of trees. We used an area, which was the cultivated piece of land, and we used a point, which was the school. So if a question asks you to provide a point, line, and polygon for B1, for example, we are in, for example, B1. It would be your rows of tree, which is your line, your cultivated piece of land, which would then be your area, and your school would be your point. In this particular case, there's a lot of lines. There's a river system that runs through this. There's another road that runs through this. Both are lines. There is also a boundary wall. It is those jagged little pieces of lines that could also be regarded as a line. There's many points on this particular piece of map as well. You have a police station, you have a church, you have a post office, you have another school, you have spot heights, you have benchmarks. There's a lot going on in this particular piece. Areas, again, quite a bit of areas. You could use the dams, for example, the cultivated pieces of land. All those would then be your areas. Raster data, exactly the same type of map that we used in the previous one. We now bring it into raster data. What do we do? Remember, we create pixels. In order to create pixels, they require tiny little blocks. So now, for instance, your row tree would be a single shaded out region on your raster data. Your area would be a solid shaded region, right? And then your school would be a point, so it would be one tiny little block. Now, how do we attribute data? So, for example, you could possibly give the address, you could give the name of the hospital, the street address that it is found on, the postal address, the geographical coordinates, the number of beds that are found within that area, within that hospital, or the number of doctors, the number of nursing personnel, how much intensive care units they have, do they have a pediatric center, or the number of operating theaters. This information is generally given to you in your infograph in the beginning of your paper, or is a separate sheet attached to your map. Attribute data comes from there. Remember that. How exactly do we use GIS? Please remember, this particular one is with regards to analysis. So, determine, identify, name which data layers are used in solving a problem. So it depends on what the question is asking you, but they will ask you to identify or determine which layer can be used to solve a problem. The next one that they could ask you for is, without thinking about GIS, identify factors or issues that play a role that relates to the problem. So this is now your predetermined type of knowledge that you would use. So maybe they're asking you about a shopping center. Do you think that this area is viable to get a shopping center? So what would you look at? You would look at your map and you would look at the general population. Is it sparsely populated? Is it densely populated? Is it an urban area? Is it a rural area? So those are the type of factors you would look at in order to ascertain or determine whether or not GIS will help in which part of your question. It also could ask you the data layers that is needed. So for example, let's take again the shopping center. Your first layer could be your population, or it could be your flat pieces of land. Your flat pieces of land would then help you to determine whether or not the area is suitable to place a shopping center on. If it's mountainous, you cannot place a shopping center there. It would require too much of additional blasting of rock in order to place a building on it. You would then look at maybe your sphere of influence, or you would look at your threshold population, for example, in order to determine whether or not that area is suitable for a shopping center. You would also look at things like your range. How far will somebody actually travel to in order to acquire what your shopping center is going to hand over? Are you dealing with low order goods? Are you dealing with high order goods? So those are the general type of questions that we get for GIS. Please remember, it is a big section in your paper. It is worth 12 marks in paper 1 and 12 in paper 2. So it might sound a little, but that could be your determining factor of whether or not you get your A or whether or not you can pass. We often leave this section blank. Don't do that. Do not leave the section blank. Attempt it. It's not that difficult. Okay? So I hope this has helped you to actually gain some sort of background information about GIS and how exactly we can use it. Please just remember the important areas that we get. Remember GIS in terms of vector data, in terms of rest data. Those are the two most important things. If you know those two, you can then answer a question based on layering, based on buffering, etc., etc. Most often, they love to ask the type of questions with regards to remote sensing. Know what remote sensing is. They also like to use data attributes, so know how to give an attribute to a spatial data. They also could ask you what is spatial data. So remember that it is not difficult if you just break down what exactly are they asking you. Brother Amir, I'm done.
MashaAllah, we say shukran, jazakallah khair. Baik, terima kasih. Thank you very much to Sister Aalia Kara for so beautifully giving over today's session pertaining to geography and how to use GIS. And I hope that all of our matriculant students currently are adequately preparing for the upcoming NSC examinations. May Allah, God Almighty, grant you all the success as you prepare for your examinations. And we hope that these Matric Revision sessions that the VOC is running in collaboration with Futures Academy will indeed assist everyone out there as you prepare to embark upon effectively studying and practicing for your upcoming NSC examinations. Once again, we say shukran, thank you very much to Sister Aalia Kara from Futures Academy for giving over the discourse today on geography. And of course, inshallah, we will have further sessions to prepare all of you, our beloved matriculants, in order to prepare for your upcoming NSC examinations. From our side, we wish you all of the very best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Shukran, Brother Amir.